Good evening, everyone. We're having a little technical trouble with our PowerPoint. Kim is the technician, the expert, so she's trying to get that up. While we're waiting for that, let me just welcome everyone. And I want to give a special shout out to Butch Phillips and the watch party that he has arranged at Gateway United Methodist Church. What a great way to get your church together for a meal and a PowerPoint about endowment building. Also, a special welcome to the folks at Why Not Win Institute in Birmingham, Alabama. So someone on their board was familiar with our foundation and read about the webinars in our publication and asked if they could join. So we're glad to have all of you with us, but I wanted to mention probably the largest group at Gateway and the furthest away in Birmingham, Alabama. If you're further away than Birmingham, you can put that in the comments and I'll correct it. But this is the second of our 4 webinars for 2026. In our spring webinar, we talked about planned giving. And the umbrella for this year, it's all about endowments. So most endowments are funded primarily through planned giving. So we did a webinar on planned giving in the spring, and Kim will provide an update about the remaining 2 webinars. But tonight we're going to talk about equipping congregational leaders for creating endowment programs that support the church's long-term mission and ministry. If Kim and I do our job correctly, then by the end of this evening, you'll be able to explain what an endowment is, identify ways that endowments can enhance and expand ministry. You'll know how to put together the right team to create and oversee your endowment program. You'll be able to describe the purpose and the key elements of a gift acceptance policy. You'll be able to promote legacy giving in ways that are invitational and pastoral, and you'll be able to use impact stories to demonstrate faithful stewardship. Endowment building is an expression of Christian stewardship. It's about generosity, stewardship, and hope. When you have an endowment program, that communicates that you have faith in the future. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to plan for the future. An endowment should serve the church's mission, not merely prop up an institution. So let's take a look first at the theological basis for endowments. And I have just a couple of verses from 1 Chronicles chapter 29 on the screen. For all things come from you, and of your own we have given you, O Lord our God, all this abundance that we have provided for building you a house for your holy name comes from your hand and is all your own. So this comes in a part of Chronicles that is explaining that David and the Hebrew people have given generously to prepare for the building of a temple. This was something that David himself would not complete or live to see fulfilled. And reflecting on the gifts, David prays, for all things come from you, and of your own have we given you. David's words remind us that Christian stewardship begins not with ownership, but with gratitude. Why gratitude? Because everything entrusted to us, our abilities, our possessions, our money, our congregations, the ministries that we cherish, everything ultimately comes from God. An endowment is a way that a congregation can faithfully prepare for ministry that will continue beyond the lives of the current members. Like David in building a temple, endowment building is planting seeds whose fruit you likely won't be around to enjoy, but future generations will get the benefit of what we're doing today. 2 weeks ago, exactly 2 weeks ago tonight, as a matter of fact, Kim and I were presenters at a financial well-being workshop on Lake Erie in northern Ohio. The keynote speaker for that event was Dr. Stan Copeland, a retired United Methodist minister from a large Dallas, Texas. I guess that's redundant to say a large Texas congregation. Everything in Texas is bigger. But Stan Copeland called this kind of thinking being a good ancestor. And he readily admitted that he borrowed that phrase from Roman Krasnarik's book, The Good Ancestor. And as soon as I got back from that event, I ordered that book. So I'm reading it now. But to be a good ancestor for the future church, we prepare the way so that another generation can worship, can serve its neighbors, can share the gospel, and can respond to needs that we have yet to even imagine. So as we begin tonight, let's consider two questions. What has God entrusted to your congregation? And how might you use those gifts to bless generations to come? Let us pray. Generous and loving God of all times, of all places, and all people, we, your people of this time and place, acknowledge that everything we have comes from you. Give us wisdom to steward your gifts faithfully, imagination to consider the possibilities, and generosity to faithfully prepare the way for those who will come behind us. May every plan we make serve your mission and reflect your love. Amen. So first, what is an endowment? Well, an endowment is a fund. It's invested to provide long-term support for ministry. The principal is generally preserved. We sometimes call an endowment a permanent fund, but I use that term advisedly. And an endowment has a spending policy that governs distributions. Now, in our next webinar, or maybe not the next one, Kim's going to cover the order of the webinars later this evening, but we'll spend more time talking about the spending plans on endowments. Could be interest and dividends, could be any amount over a certain dollar amount, or it could be, and this is the preferred way of having a spending plan, a prudent percentage that's based on a rolling average market value. So that's what an endowment is. Clear purposes, written policies, and disciplined oversight help ensure that endowment funds remain a source of ministry rather than conflict. Because believe it or not, there can be conflict if an endowment is not properly managed. The argument against endowments says that a large endowment will cause the congregation to stop giving. Well, that's not true, and it will only be true if the congregation stops being generous. In order to prevent that, the trustees or the endowment committee needs to be transparent about every aspect of the endowment to ensure that it won't be a source of conflict. Often the conflict arises because there's an endowment and the people in charge are not transparent about how big it is. They're afraid that if the congregation knows how big it is, they'll stop giving. In fact, the congregation is probably thinking it's 2 or 3 times bigger than it actually is. So what do? They stop giving. So I'll say several times tonight to be transparent, to have a healthy situation with an endowment. The endowment should support ministry, not the budget. You don't want the budget to take the place, or you don't want the endowment to take the place of your congregation or your regular annual donors. So how can you ensure that the endowment will support ministry? Potential uses of the annual distributions include, and Kim and I just came up with this list, but it's just representative. It could be many other things. Mission and outreach, new and emerging ministries, scholarships, camps, leadership development, music, worship, arts, maintenance of historic buildings or sacred spaces. This is a big one in the West Virginia Conference. Our churches are older, and just think if you had an endowment that you could set aside to help with the maintenance or repairs of your historic buildings. Without an endowment, a new boiler or a new roof will put a big strain on the budget, and it's probably not in the budget, so it'll put a big strain on any reserves that you're likely to have. So if you plan ahead and have a healthy endowment, those types of issues that come up, like a 100-year flood, can be taken care of without stressing the finances of the church too much. And the list goes on: accessibility, technology, environmental initiatives, clergy and staff development, ministries for age-specific groups like children, youth, older adults. And then it can be used for matching funds that inspire additional congregational generosity. When the church is developing an endowment program, the leaders should define the purposes that for your congregation are most compelling, mission-focused, and also broad enough to remain relevant. You could ask yourself, what would our congregation do if it had a dependable source of ministry funding beyond the annual budget? So next, who should be involved in creating the endowment? We suggest that it should be a diverse group of leaders, of pastor and lay leaders. In many churches, the trustees serve as the endowment committee. Trustees can also create a subgroup that is the endowment committee. But there's a list there to include people from other committees, representatives from other committees, any members that have specific expertise in areas of legal, financial, investment, communications, or fundraising. We stress diversity in every way that you can have diversity, and that you don't forget any newer members you may have and the different perspective that they may bring to the decision making. And then clarify the responsibilities for establishing the purpose of the fund, approving the governing documents and policies, managing the investments of the endowment. Who's going to manage that? Are you going to outsource that? Establishing the spending plan. That's what we talked about earlier. Is it going to be interest and dividends only, or is it going to be a prudent percentage? Authorizing, and I put carefully any distributions beyond the spending plan, because you may want to have situations such as if the boiler breaks down or if the roof comes off. Are there certain times that we can invade the principle of the endowment? You want to be very judicious about defining those times and make sure you're not just invading the principle to pay the current expenses of the church, because that really would be a sign of a church that is in decline and probably will not last much longer. We had a church that has an endowment, and it's a small endowment with $40,000, and there was not a way that they could invade the principle because it was created by an individual. A person gave their life's accumulated income or life's accumulated resources for an endowment and said that it was permanent. And the church is just down to its last few members, and they wanted the $40,000 to get by another 6 months. And that one church member's lifetime accumulation cannot be used to help that church limp along just for a short period of time. You have to educate the congregation about the endowment. Kim and I have worked with churches sometimes who have worked to create an endowment, and they have the policies, they have the fund, maybe they put some seed money in it, but then they never tell the congregation about it. So you have to tell the congregation, you have to tell the congregation the ways they can give to it. And then you have to start working on cultivating the gifts for the endowment, and then reporting regularly and transparently. There's that word again, transparently, to the congregation. One of the policies that you'll want to have is a gift acceptance policy. This is a written policy for deciding which gifts the church will accept and under what conditions, and perhaps in terms of your endowment, what gifts will go into the endowment. I think a good provision to have in a gift acceptance policy is that all planned gifts that are undesignated go into the endowment, or a percentage of all planned gifts, a large percentage of all planned gifts will go into the endowment. A gift acceptance policy properly written will protect the donor and the congregation and church leadership. It encourages consistent decisions rather than just deciding things on a case-by-case basis. It encourages or it prevents accepting gifts that can carry excessive cost, liability, or burdens. The best example of this is property, real estate. A gift acceptance policy should define the donor's duties in passing good title and getting a clear environmental audit done on the property, because the church doesn't want to be stuck with property that is going to have a big, expensive environmental cleanup. And the way to avoid that, without hurting the donor's feelings, is to say, well, this is what our policy requires. And we are thankful at the foundation that we've been able to point to that policy when we had donors who were wanting to give away property that was a little questionable. Once we said, you have to get this audit at your expense, that was the end of it. The gift acceptance policy should also clarify what special expertise may be needed for gifts, for certain gifts, tax advice, legal advice, environmental advice. And as I mentioned, it helps leaders decline unsuitable gifts in a way that is gracious without hurting any feelings, because it's just our policy. It also clarifies that donors should obtain their own professional advice on tax matters and legal matters. The gift acceptance policy should address gifts of cash, gifts of publicly traded securities, bequests and beneficiary designations, and I would say all planned gifts, real estate, closely held business interests, tangible personal property, life insurance, retirement assets, charitable trusts, gift annuities, restricted gifts, valuations, appraisals, acknowledgement practices, authority to review and accept unusual gifts, procedures for declining and disposing of gifts. For instance, a gift acceptance policy should say that the church in these cases has the sole discretion of whether to hold or dispose of any gift. You think mostly of publicly traded securities, but when someone gives a gift without a restriction, the church has the right to dispose of those securities and not hold on to them because they were valuable to someone in the congregation. Go ahead and get it into the asset mix that the church is comfortable with. And then it should also address conflicts of interest and donor confidentiality. Now, you're lucky because we have a sample gift acceptance policy that we will give to you for free. I think Kim has already probably put in the chat where you can find it, and you can adapt that, because I know reading through this list probably seemed a little overwhelming, but we've got a starting point for you, and you'll be able to use that to come up with the gift acceptance policy that works for your congregation. Why is this important? Well, we share a lot of stories and examples, and the best example I have is a bad example on this. I was asked, this was over 20 years ago, I was asked to join the board of a nonprofit, and before I accepted the offer, I said, why me? And the person who was recruiting me said, well, we heard that you have an expertise in planned giving and gift acceptance policies and endowment building. And we need someone like that because we have no endowment. We've never had a planned gift. Well, that got to my ego. So I accepted the offer. I got on the board. And once I was formally a part of the board, I helped draft an endowment policy and a gift acceptance policy. The gift acceptance policy said that a certain percentage, it wasn't 100%, I don't remember what it was, but it was a certain percentage, a high percentage of all planned gifts would go to the endowment. Well, believe it or not, the charity included an article about the endowment, the new endowment fund, put it in their monthly newsletter, and a woman, a friend of that charity, never a board member, but a consistent donor, actually went out and changed her will and put a bequest for the charity for a percentage of her estate, and then tragically died. But it was a sudden, unexpected death, and she wasn't that old. But just by good fortune, she had changed her will and this gift of something like $120,000 came in. First bequest, largest gift ever. And guess what? Management had lots of ideas for what they could do with that $120,000. But then board members, including me, said, hey, wait a minute, remember, we have a gift acceptance policy that says a certain percentage of this is going to the endowment. And the manager, the executive director actually said, well, that was created by the board and the board could change it. But fortunately, there were enough of us who were on the board that said, look, we never had a bequest until we got this gift acceptance policy. If we take this gift and use it, we'll never get another bequest. So that's why I say be transparent, have good policies, and follow your policies. Now, Kim's going to share now about how to market the endowment, but before I turn the reins over to her, I just want to repeat that again. Have good policies, be transparent, and follow your policies. Kim?
Thank you. We've had a couple questions about the slides, and the slides are also on the page where the gift acceptance policy sample is. You will receive an email once the recording is ready that directs you to that page, although you could go find it now. It's umfwv.org/webinars. Jeff will be watching the chat if you have questions, and when we get to the end of our presentation, we'll intentionally have some time for questions then too. But feel free to drop those in the chat and anytime. So you have a gift acceptance policy, and you've developed a team that's going to work with the endowment, and the trustees are on board, and you have everything ready, and you launch and you think, wow, great, I'm just so glad that's over. But really, building the endowment has just begun. What I'm going to be talking about is marketing the endowment. How do you help people understand that it's there and it's available to receive gifts? Some helpful practices to think about. We'll go through those, but before we do it, there's one point I want to make. Keep in mind that when marketing endowments and legacy giving, it has to be continuous. It can't be a one and done kind of thing or something you only do in March, just as an example. You need to do it consistently and intentionally throughout the year. People won't be listening to you with your marketing until they need to hear it. There'll be some life event that happens in their lives. Maybe they're writing their wills, or a parent has died and left them funds that they need to deal with, or they've changed jobs, and whatever it might be, there'll be some kind of life event that will cause them to hear what you're saying. But until that happens to them, what you're telling them isn't relevant. So there'll come a point when what you're telling them is relevant to them. So you have to be intentional and consistent with your marketing of endowments. So a few hints. First, frame legacy giving and endowments as an invitation to extend the lifetime of faith and generosity. There's a great little book by Henry Nouwen called The Spirituality of Fundraising. I've mentioned a book, Jeff's mentioned one. They're both linked on that page I mentioned, so that you can go find them if you're interested more in them. Although The Spirituality of Fundraising, if you ask us, we will send you that book for free. It's a tiny little book, but it's a great something that can change your mind about fundraising, I think. But in that book, Henry Nouwen reminds us that invitations to give money are invitations to ministry. This is true for the annual fundraising, and it's also true for legacy fundraising. You are offering an invitation into kingdom-changing ministry. You're not just asking for money. You're inviting them into something bigger than themselves. So remember to frame your legacy giving invitations as invitations to ministry. Secondly, every legacy matters. This is not limited to wealthy donors, and it's something that's particular to legacy giving, to planned giving, to giving to endowments. People who give to endowments are invested in their church. They've been giving of their money, and maybe not a lot at one time, but consistently all the time. They're giving of their money, they're giving of their time, maybe they're volunteers, they're giving of their gifts. They are invested in the church, and then they will give a legacy gift as well because it is close to their hearts. So it's those invested people that will give gifts, and it's not necessarily always the people who you think have a lot of money. Their legacy gifts can be made to honor a loved one or support a cherished ministry or express gratitude. We have a donor couple at the foundation who asked me to come out and visit with them. There's a lot of ministry that happens around tables, and we sat around their kitchen table and they talked to me about what they wanted to do. They wanted to establish a donor advice fund, which is a fund at the foundation where you can suggest giving from it. And then once they die, they wanted that donor advice fund to become a scholarship. Their son had been very involved in education and with young people, and they want the scholarship to be set up in memory of their son. So they're honoring the memory of their son and his passion for education through a scholarship. So endowments can honor or remember a loved one. There are gifts that can be arranged now that don't affect your current income. A bequest is a perfect example of that. It's something you plan for the future. It doesn't affect your income now, but it's something that will make a gift in the future. And there are other legacy giving vehicles that do that. We had a webinar a few months ago about legacy giving and those tools. The recording of that is on our website. I'll talk more about that at the end, but that's a place you could go to learn more about those. Just always welcome confidential conversations without pressure or obligation. The best marketing tool you can do is just to be a really good listener and to help people as they talk to you, that you're listening to what they're trying to tell you, that you're listening to their thoughts about their legacy. So if you do that and then move on to finding someone who can help them do what they want to do, you're doing one of the best steps in marketing legacy giving. Legacy giving marketing should be multi-channeled. There are lots of ways that you can do this, and doing more than one or more than two is always a good idea. Sermons are a great place to talk about legacy. Jeff started this out with a scripture that was about generosity. We have a whole list of scriptures that you can think about generosity. And really, stewardship is about discipleship. So practically every sermon you preach can be about discipleship and stewardship. Those witness events that you have in your church where someone talks about stewardship, they can also talk about maybe they've made a planned gift or they've given to the endowment and why they did it and why it's important to them and the ministry they are supporting by doing that. Your newsletter and your bulletin are great places. We have on our website, we have newsletter articles you can use in your own website your own newsletter to talk about bequests or to talk about the foundation or charitable gift annuities. They're just there for you to personalize and make your own, to drop them in your newsletter. You can also put what are called one-liners on your receipts or on your bulletins. Have you considered a gift to First United Methodist Church in your will? A simple one line. Remember, you're being consistent and intentional about your communication and having that there every time. When it's relevant, they'll see it. Before then, they won't see it at all. Use plain language instead of, I skipped. Let's go back. Have an estate planning seminar or webinar, and you can invite the foundation to do it. We do those things for free, and we are glad to help you. That's why we're here. So have an estate planning webinar. You can do brochures, and we can even help you design those, to custom design them for your church. You can put it on pledge cards. Have you considered a gift in your will to our church? You can provide sample bequest language. That's something the foundation can help you with. We don't help people write wills. You need an attorney professional to do that, but we can give you bequest language that can help the donor leave a gift to the church or leave a gift to the foundation to benefit the church. And testimonials and stories. We'll talk more about those in a little bit. Some helpful practices when you're communicating about the endowment. We already talked about communicate throughout the year, not only during stewardship season, but you can talk about it during stewardship season. Some churches feel like it will compete, that the annual giving and the endowment giving will compete with each other, but really they don't, because remember, people are giving because they're invested in the church and they love the church and they're following God's leadership to be generous. And there are different ways to give. The way you give to the annual campaign with your checkbook or your online giving portal is different than a way you would make an endowment gift out of different sources of income, sources of resources. Use plain language and not technical jargon when you talk about planned giving. Coordinate messages among the team. So you're coordinating what you're going to say and what's going on even. They help make sure everybody on your team is aware of the endowment giving campaign you're having or communication that you're having. I mean, I just think it would be really awful if somebody went up to a chair of a committee and said, I hear the church is starting an endowment. And the chair of that committee said, what? I have no idea what you're talking about. I have no idea why we would do that. Get everyone on board so everyone is aware and supportive of what you're doing. You might consider creating a legacy society. That's just a recognition society. You have to make sure that people who give are willing to be included in that publicly. You don't want to include someone who doesn't want to be included. But be intentional about it. It's a very detail-oriented process that you have to keep up with. So if you do it, you want to commit to it and make sure that your data that you're using to create the legacy society is accurate. Don't provide individual legal or tax advice. That's not what we're here to do. We don't do it. We don't encourage you to do it, but you can refer people to their own professionals, their attorneys, their financial planners. Encourage them to consult with professional advisors. Encourage them to include their families in the discussion as well. It's just a great way to get everyone involved and to understand. Just as the way you are helping your team understand what you're doing, the family can be helped by the donor to understand what's going on. I mentioned stories. Stories are a great way to talk about endowments. They are ways to translate financial structures, which are kind of dry and maybe hard to follow, into relatable ministry. Effective stories share some common characteristics. An effective story shows how generosity changes lives. Excuse me. It connects past gifts with present ministry. I often tell a story about people who set up endowments years and years and years ago to help UMCOR. They did not know that there would be flooding in West Virginia in 2016, but their gifts certainly helped the response to that flood. So a past endowment helps with present ministry. Tell those stories. It helps members to imagine the future impact of their own legacies. If you can see how other people's legacies are having an impact, you can imagine how yours would. Build confidence through transparency. Here's that word again. Jeff's mentioned it more than once about transparency. Be transparent about your endowment, but you have to also be transparent about the good that the endowment is doing. Just giving someone a number of how big the endowment is not all there is to transparency. Transparency also says we use the income from this endowment to support scholarships that have sent kids to school and from our congregation or from the community. Be sure to link the transparency of the ministry back to the endowment too. celebrate donors without focusing on gift amounts, consecrate those gifts to the endowment in ministry. We even have a order of worship you can use to do that. But that consecration helps people understand that this giving to the future of the church is sacred, and we're consecrating it to God's work. That's just one way to celebrate donors. If people give gifts in honor or memory of someone, be sure that it's okay and put that in the newsletter. These gifts were given in memory of John Smith, who died last month, in memory of him. Just help people to share that news. And those stories will demonstrate that endowment distributions advance mission and ministry. So be sure you know how they do that. How does your endowment income advance ministry? Dig into that and have that story to tell. I want to talk a minute about a framework for a good impact story. There are 4 parts we've listed here: that you're talking about the need, what ministry opportunity or challenge existed, the gift, how did the endowment provide help, the impact, who benefited and what changed because of the gift, and the invitation, how can other people participate in this continuing story? To make that a little more real, I'll tell you a story. I was in a meeting once with a mission project director, and he was talking about how in his community, the price of housing had really skyrocketed, the price of groceries, everything people needed who were on the margins had gotten more expensive and had made people homeless, and they were coming to the mission project for help. That was the need. People couldn't afford rent anymore. They couldn't afford food or clothes or get their kids ready for school, so they were coming to the mission project to help. And he built that whole picture of need. And then he talked about how the mission project was helping, how gifts to the mission project, and those include gifts from endowments. We have lots of endowments that support mission projects, including the one he was the leader of. How those gifts help, how they provide the food that's in the food pantry and the clothing in the clothing pantry and rent assistance and utility assistance, and how they make a difference in kids starting school. So who benefited and what changed? And so when he would bring up an example of a family that came to the mission project and how they got them fed and they got them back in housing and they got their kids in programs that helped them with school. What difference did it make? And he could tell you exactly the difference. And by the time he was finished, I mean, he could very easily say, here's how you could help. And all of us in the room were ready to stand up and help. A story that has those 4 components can really make a difference. So I encourage you to think about the stories in your congregation. What's the mission of your congregation? How is giving and giving through endowments helping you to accomplish that mission? Use names, use photographs, quotations, and financial details only with appropriate permission. And combine those human stories with concise and transparent reporting on distributions and outcomes. So your transparency, there we go again, is about the endowment, the technical aspects of the endowment, the income you're using and the restrictions on it, plus what good it's doing, how it's advancing God's work in your church, through your church, into your community. I'm going to turn this back to Jeff so he can talk about first steps you might take and lead us through the end of this webinar. Remember, if you have questions or comments, to add those to the chat and we'll get to those.
Thanks, Kim. I want to say in leading us to this last section that the United Methodist Foundation of West Virginia is really an endowment program that was created by the West Virginia Conference. 52 years ago, it was created. And so 2 years ago, we were preparing, or our anniversary was 2 years ago. So 3 and 4 years ago, we were preparing for the celebration of our 50th anniversary. And we went back and looked at some of the historical documents about the creation of the foundation, including the minutes of annual conference sessions leading up to the special session when the foundation was created in 19 74, September of that year. And believe it or not, there was a lot of conflict around this idea of why would we tie up money that we need today? Why would we store up this treasure when there are so many needs today? But the motion carried and the foundation was created. It was called West Virginia Charities United Methodist Charities of West Virginia at the time. But I know that the leaders back in 1974 would be blown away to know that what they planted, the seeds that they planted so many years ago, and the fruit that they're bearing now. So when's the best time to create an endowment program? 52 years ago or more even. But you can't do that. You can't go back and start something in the past. So the second best time is now. And remember that we're looking at the future. We're looking at future generations. We're wanting to be a good ancestor. We're not looking for a Band-Aid for our church's financial problems this year. We're trying to help the future generations avoid these same kinds of issues that we're dealing with now. So how do we begin? Well, as with anything, we suggest beginning with prayer. Prayer and conversation with church leaders about the future mission and vision of the church, thinking long term. Next, we suggest reviewing those restricted funds that you might have, memorial funds, policies that you have. And you may already have the beginning of an endowment fund in some of these, I'm going to use air quotes, restricted funds. And the reason I used air quotes is because sometimes there's lore around the church that there is a restricted fund, when in fact, it's not truly a legal restriction. It was just that the leaders who received this gift at a particular time wanted to honor the memory of someone. So let's say that it was someone who died who loved the organ, so they created an organ fund. Well, is that truly a restricted fund, or is it just something that the church leaders at that time decided would be a good use of that? And if it's not truly restricted, that could be broadened to be the seeds of the endowment, particularly if it is an organ fund and the church no longer has an organist, or maybe no longer has even the organ. But in any event, that's just one potential example. I know of one church that we helped who had really quite a large endowment once they finally got through all of the restrictions, and they even had one member who was comfortable going around the courthouse, so he actually went to the record room and looked at all of those old wills where these gifts had come from, where the church had placed restrictions on them that weren't actually in the will. So if the restriction didn't make any sense for the current ministries of the church or the future ministries, they simply removed the restrictions. And I always follow the donor's intent. But if it's the church who placed the restriction on it and not the donor, then that can be broadened. So then identify the team to explore the creation of the endowment. We want you to consult with us. We will help you through every step of the way in creating this endowment, with all of the paperwork that you need to get started, and with marketing it to your congregation. We work with a lot of churches around the conference in doing this, and have helped them grow healthy endowment funds. You'll then want to draft all of the policies, and that's something we can help you with. Obtain the approval of the necessary church body, and then you start developing the education of the congregation and the marketing and development work for getting the funds in place for your endowment, and then launch it with a clear ministry story and a simple invitation. As Kim stressed, you're inviting people to participate in planting seeds for the future. You're not telling people that they're obligated to do this. You're not using guilt. You're inviting people who love the church, who are supporting the church now. You're inviting them to participate in the future of the church. And then report every year on the endowment, on the investments, on the distributions, and perhaps most importantly, on the ministry impact that the endowment is having. How were lives changed? How were children clothed or fed? Those kinds of stories that tell the true impact, not just the dollar amount of distributions. So in closing, I would just invite you to reflect on this one question. What is one action your congregation can take in the next 30 days toward creating an endowment program? With that, we've got 7 minutes, and if you've got more than 7 minutes of questions, we'll stick around, but we have time for questions.
We do have one, Jeff, in the chat. How big does an endowment have to be, and does it draw interest?
Yeah. At the foundation, we open endowment accounts for as little as $1,000. Now, we don't make distributions from endowments until they reach, is it 3,000, Kim, or
5,000.
5,000. And if you think the foundation's spending plan is 3.5% of the average market value. So if you have an endowment that's worth $1,000, it's going to produce $3.50, or is it $35?
$35.
$35. I'm not very good with numbers. But it's not going to make a very meaningful distribution. So the idea is to let it compound, and the endowment will grow through compounding as well as through market performance. And, when you get up to $20,000, $30,000 and higher, that's when you can have a distribution that is really meaningful and can have an impact on your church's ministries. But the big thing really is to get it started. So $1,000, you can have an account at the foundation. It earns, we do this intentionally. The account that we have that is worth $1,000 gets the exact same percentage return as the account that we have that's worth $20 million. Now, don't tell the $20 million account holder that. But the idea is to help small churches with smaller amounts to invest get good investment returns. I hope that answers your question. I don't see any other questions. Kim, do you want to go ahead and talk about the next two webinars?
Yes, I
And
will.
and I'll say while Kim is doing this, I'll issue a last call for questions, and we'll come back if you put any questions on the chat. That's who we are. I don't know if
So,
I introduced myself. Sorry. Go ahead, Kim.
so that's Jeff. Jeff is an attorney and a deacon in the United Methodist Church. He's chair of the Methodist Theological School and Ohio Board of Trustees, past president of our national organization, and past president of the Cabell County Bar Association. That's me next to him on the screen. My degrees are from Marshall University, Goethe Hurd. I have a couple certificates from Indiana University's Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, and I'm a certified lay minister, and I'm the associate conference lay leader of the annual conference. So Jeff is clergy and I am laity, and together we cover everything. But I did want to mention our upcoming webinars. Our theme this year is endowment building, and you've just been through the second of that series. If you're interested, the first one was on plan giving, the tools of plan giving, and the recording of that is on our website. But coming up in the future, we have next in October, best practices in investing endowments. As that endowment grows, you have to discover how to invest it in a way for long-term growth in the future. We'll have Evan Witkowski and Karen Mansko of Westpath Institutional Investments, our investment manager, will come and talk about investing endowments. And then in November, our final one is on best practices in managing endowments. How do you manage an endowment now that it's growing? We'll talk about spending rates from endowments. We'll talk about MIFA and why it's important. It has to do with those spending rates. We'll talk about restrictions. Jeff mentioned that a little bit, but we'll really dig into those restrictions and what they mean next time. And more about the necessity of transparency and how the foundation can help in the creation and management of endowment accounts. So those, you can register for those at our website, which is umfwv.org/webinars, which is written on the screen there. And we'll include that link in the email that comes out to you soon.
Kim, we do have another question.
Okay.
Mike Estep asked what percentage does the foundation charge? And I'm glad he asked that question. We don't charge any fees for any of our services other than investment management. And it's a asset-based fee, which is 75 basis points, which is another way of saying 0.75% per year. And it comes out of the return on investment. And there's no other fee. There aren't any transaction charges, no minimum balances to carry, no penalties for early withdrawal, etc.
And when you see the foundation's returns published, we keep them on our website and we publish them in our publications. They're always net of fees. So that's after the fees have been deducted.
Yeah. Good question. But to come to your church and to do a seminar about planned giving or to help you through any of these processes, there's no fee for that. And there's no obligation that you invest your funds with us. None at all. We work with any church that wants to work with us, whether they have their funds invested with us or not. I mean, they should have them with us. Any other questions? Well, it looks like we're right at 8:01, so we want to be true to our time. If you think of any questions that you didn't get to ask or forgot to ask, feel free to contact us by email, Facebook, telephone, however you want to reach us. Thanks for your participation tonight. And we look forward to seeing you at future webinars. Thank you
Have
all.
a good evening. Thank you for being here.